everyone. Welcome to Growing in Uncertainty. My name is Tess Miller, and I have a cat that's meowing underneath me, so that's Myra, if you're wondering. Anyway, I've spent a fair amount of my life feeling or being stuck and uncertain about where I was headed in my life or what I wanted in my life. And that's why I call these videos Growing in Uncertainty. Because two things that I've learned about being stuck is that, number one, the only certainty in life is the uncertainty of life. And number two, my biggest growth happens when I'm feeling stuck and uncertain. You know, when I have to figure out what it is that I need or want for myself in those moments of being stuck. So hence growing in uncertainty. So knowing this, I decided that what I wanted to do in my career is to share with others what I've learned about being stuck through my seminar and coaching business, Wings Unfolded. My intention with everything that I share with you is to draw on my own life experiences with being stuck and uncertain, and to help you with whatever you're feeling stuck about in your life. This might be career stuck, relationship stuck, or maybe it's just you don't know who you are or what you want stuck. My intention is to help you with any and all of those things. So over the last few weeks, I've been developing a framework to work on one of the biggest monsters of stuck in our lives. And the big monster that I named was self-doubt. And over the last several videos, I've been talking about different ways that we can interact with self-doubt or combat self-doubt. So I've done videos on self-acknowledgement, self-acceptance, self-trust, self-confidence, self-forgiveness. Last week's was about self-worth, and today's is all about self-compassion. And apparently Myra also has a lot to say about self-compassion. So I'm going to be going over what self-compassion is, what to do if it's difficult for you to extend compassion towards yourself, and also ways that you can practice self-compassion, because it's like a muscle. It's like anything. We have to practice it. So self-compassion is when we acknowledge our own suffering in life. You know, some people might say, well, what's the point of acknowledging my suffering? Doesn't that just make me double suffer? Or isn't that just, you know, indulging myself in a whole bunch of self-pity? And, you know, it's understandable that it looks like that sometimes, you know, as we think about extending self-compassion and going through that process for ourselves. But it might be helpful to look at what happens, what are the mechanics of having compassion for other people in our lives before we can really take a look at what compassion directed towards ourselves from ourselves could actually do for us. So let's look at compassion for other people. The definition of compassion is sympathetic pity and concern for the sufferings or misfortunes of others. The word compassion comes from the Latin word compati or compati, which means to suffer with. Compassion can look like hearing a friend tell you something that is going on in their lives that's really troubling to them or traumatic to them, and you experiencing the emotions that they might be experiencing. You know, maybe you end up crying with your friend, or acknowledging the feelings, like really recognizing the feelings that your friend might be feeling in that moment. It might even look like, I know for me, I have a tendency, if I'm watching movies where characters become emotionally upset by something, I might have an emotional response to that. I might cry at the sight of someone in a movie suffering. Or it might be experiencing emotional pain, seeing someone in a less than ideal situation. For example, a homeless person. You can think about what you experience when you see someone at the side of the road collecting money or items because they might not have the means or ability to support themselves in the way that most other people are able. So you might have emotional pain when seeing something like that. And really, anytime emotional pain happens in response to learning of or seeing someone else suffering, can invoke that compassion. We want to do something to ease that suffering. So what do you typically do when someone in your life is suffering? A lot of times people might offer an ear. You might listen to your friend talk about whatever's making them suffer, or you might make food. I know when people experience a loss, that's kind of a traditional thing that neighbors will do, is they'll bring food over, or maybe send a card to let somebody know that you're thinking about them, or help them with something in the yard, or take care of tasks, or really any action that will help ease their suffering in some way. Imagine what would happen if you did this instead, though. What if a friend of yours were suffering and you said, oh, just get over it, or you would help them focus on something else instead, ignoring their feelings, like, oh, okay, yeah, that happened, but hey, check this out over here. Or you might start telling a story about yourself so that you didn't have to hear about their feelings. Or you might tell your friend, oh, I don't have time to deal with this right now. Or you might tell them that they're overreacting and they really shouldn't feel that way. Or you get angry at them for even bringing it up with you. It's probably pretty hard to imagine that you would actually do this to someone, right? But the question is, why do we do that to ourselves? Because I know I have. If I've been suffering with something, I might have a tendency to say something like, oh, come on, Tess, you're just overreacting. Or, oh, come on, that's not what they meant by it. Just get over it. Think about what happens to you when you're suffering. What do you do for yourself? What do you say to yourself in those moments? How do you take care of yourself? Is it difficult for you to extend self-compassion to yourself? When we don't show ourselves compassion, what can end up happening is our emotions can end up buried. But trust me, they'll come back. They always do. Those emotions that we push down end up being triggered by something else later on in life, and they'll come back up, and you'll wonder, oh my gosh, why am I feeling so strongly about this? I'll have a story for you later that outlines how that happens. Or if we don't give ourselves self-compassion, it can make the suffering more intense. Remember that whatever we resist persists. Or it might create a sense of doubting our own responses in life. If we aren't there to acknowledge and validate our own feelings and experiences in this life, how can we trust ourselves? You wouldn't trust a friend who didn't acknowledge and validate your emotions and experiences. So why would you do that for yourself if you're not acknowledging and validating it? It can also burn us out. If we're ignoring our suffering, it's a huge energy drain. And, pretty soon we won't have any energy left over to deal with whatever's causing the suffering. And then we're really stuck at that point. We also, without compassion, we don't allow ourselves to process what's actually happening. And then we keep ourselves stuck in life situations that we might keep saying we want to change. Like, oh, I really want to lose weight. I really want to get a different job. I really want to be happier. I want to experience more joy. But when we don't look at what's causing our suffering and allow the compassion to come in, it's really hard to get out of those stuck places. There are lots of reasons why self-compassion might be difficult for us. Maybe life is really busy and stressful, and it feels much easier in the moment to say, oh, I don't have time for this right now. I'll think about that later. Or maybe your feelings are really intense and seem overwhelming, and you're afraid that if you start letting yourself feel the feelings, you might not be able to stop. That is a really common one, and it's totally understandable. Feelings can be so overwhelming. And at the same time, what I hear most often with my clients is, oh my gosh, I've been avoiding that feeling for so long, and now I don't know why. It really wasn't as big as I thought it would be. But sometimes if the feelings are intense, it's important to find someone to help you through that, whether it's a therapist or a coach. So just something to think about. Some people just think it's too uncomfortable to allow ourselves to look at the suffering. It is easier to ignore it. Or you're afraid that you might let yourself off the hook for other things in life. If you extend compassion to yourself, if I'm compassionate towards myself about this, then I might not keep pushing myself to achieve these goals. I might not continue pushing myself to be the best version of myself. But ultimately, again, think about what would happen if you didn't extend compassion to your friend. Number one, you might lose that friendship connection, and you might make your friend feel worse. And the same is true for ourselves. When we don't extend compassion towards ourselves, we lose the connection that we have with ourselves, and we also make ourselves feel worse. So ultimately, it's in the long run in our best interest to extend that self-compassion. So what can you do if it's really hard to show yourself compassion? Well, first, you can contemplate how compassion for yourself and others was handled when you were a kid. That's a biggie. When you were young, was it okay for the people in your life or for you to express or work with your emotional pain? Was action taken to help you or others in your family when they were suffering? Or were you told to just get over it? You're overreacting. You're too sensitive. You shouldn't feel that way. Really reflect on what compassion looked like in your family. That might be what's making it difficult for you to circle that compassion back around towards yourself. The second thing that you can do, and this comes on the heels of what I just talked about, is check for your beliefs about suffering. Do you feel safe? If you're experiencing some emotional pain about something, once you know what compassion looked like when you were a kid, and you can take a look at how that experience informs your current way of expressing and experiencing compassion. So if you have a tendency to want to push away someone else's suffering, Of course you're going to want to do that to yourself. And again, that might come from an earlier time in your life. Or you might need to work on how you view suffering in general. If you view suffering as a weakness, or other people are going to see you as weak if you're experiencing suffering or emotional pain, well, then it's going to be really hard for you to be compassionate about that. Remember that your ability to get unstuck in your life, in any area of your life, is directly related to your ability to recognize and deal with the suffering that comes from being stuck. So, and then the third thing that you can do is, if you have a really negative view about suffering, and by the way, you wouldn't be watching this video if you weren't ready to deal with some self-compassion. Watching things like this are such a great first step in acknowledging some of the work that you might need to do on compassion for yourself. But ultimately, the third thing that you might consider doing is working with a therapist or a coach on some of the thoughts and beliefs that you have around suffering. So if, however, you're ready to develop some self-compassion, I have a few practices that you can consider. The first practice is, how would you treat a friend? This is a great one to allow you to step out of your own story, step out of your own skin, and take a look at it from another viewpoint. You can view your experience as if you are a friend of yourself. Maybe in a journal entry, you could take your situation or your current life story and pretend that you're a friend of yourself and write down some responses that you would give yourself, or write down some actions that you would take towards your friend experiencing this life situation. What would you do for your friend? Would you, suggest that they take a nap? Would you help them organize something so that they weren't so stressed out? I don't know, but you can write down in your journal what you might do or say to them, and then you can go do those things for yourself or say those things to yourself. Another practice that you can try is to ask yourself, what do I really need in this moment? If it's at all possible, when you're experiencing some emotional pain or emotional suffering, if you can stop doing whatever it is that you're doing and assess what you need in that moment, that can do a lot to help you shift your emotion and help you process that emotion at the same time. So here's my story. This one is actually really fresh. It happened yesterday, in fact. I was playing at the hospital, and you may or may not know already that playing at the hospital for me is a joy, but right now, because of the pandemic, I'm very limited in what I'm allowed to provide as a therapeutic musician. Normally, I would play my alto flute, I would sing and accompany myself with a ukulele, but I'm not allowed to play my flute because of the ongoing pandemic, and I'm not allowed to sing even with a mask on, but I am allowed to play my ukulele. And honestly, I'm still feeling very insecure about what I'm able to offer on my ukulele. Even though I've gotten really good feedback from a lot of people in the hospital, nurses, staff, patients, I've gotten a lot of good feedback about what I've been doing. And yet, there is still that part of me that's feeling insecure about it. So yesterday, I was playing in an area of the hospital, and it was in an area where there were a lot of people in one group. And as I was playing, I noticed a man kind of shifting around a lot. And I thought it was because, in that area, it was in infusion. And, patients there have to sit for a very long time having their procedures done. And, just kind of empathizing with this other person, I knew, gosh, it's got to be really hard to sit there for so long. I imagine you would need to shift around a lot. Well, then, for some reason, I started to get the impression that maybe it was the music that was bothering this person. So I decided, I've probably played enough. I think I'll wrap it up, just in case that might be what's making this person upset. So I left and I went around the corner, and then I started to hear him go on and on about how the sound of the ukulele was like nails on a chalkboard. And, why was she playing for so long? I thought she'd never stop. And in that moment, I was absolutely triggered. I felt horrible that I hadn't noticed sooner that he didn't like the music. I felt horrible that he didn't say something sooner. I certainly would have stopped a lot sooner had I known that that's how he was feeling about what I was doing. And the fact that he went on and on about how much he disliked what I was doing, again, just really made me feel horrible. I'm there to help, not make things worse. So what happened, because I was already feeling insecure, I ended up breaking down crying. And I wasn't really able to get through the rest of my day because I felt so bad about it. And I asked myself, okay, what do I really need right now? And I knew that I needed to probably not be at the hospital that day, because anything that I was going to be doing was going to be coming from that place of like deep shame and sadness and insecurity. So I cut my day short and I left. And then after that, I knew that I needed a little bit more self-care. So I definitely called a friend and I talked to her. Thank you if you're watching. And I took a nap. I fed myself. And I reflected on some of the other things that were going on in my life that might have fueled what was happening. And I developed a deeper understanding of where that trigger was for me, and why it was triggered so much. So instead of avoiding it, I really went deeper into it. And by the end of the day, I had a lot more clarity. And, of course, I don't feel any, anger or blame towards that man. He's going through enough on his own, whatever his health condition is, and he can't help it if those were sounds that were not pleasing to his ear. But I can also forgive myself for not knowing, or for, reacting in the way that I did in that moment. So, taking action to support yourself is another practice that you can incorporate in really demonstrating self-compassion in your life. It's those little actions that help develop that connection you have with yourself, and also develop your self-trust. The third practice that I would suggest is to maybe develop a meditation practice. I know you've heard me talk about this before. I know meditation isn't for everyone. That's totally okay. But if you are into meditating, there are a ton of self-compassion meditations and a lot of other information on a particular website. There's a researcher named Kristin Neff, who is kind of the pioneer in the field of self-compassion. And there are a whole bunch of meditations on that website that you can check out. That website is www.self-compassion.org. I will try to leave that website in the comments if you want to check that out later on. But that is a fantastic resource if you want to know a little bit more about the research behind self-compassion and what the science is showing can happen for us when we do develop those practices of self-compassion. So notice that I'm calling these practices because, especially if you're not used to showing yourself compassion, you might need to take baby steps towards it. It's not like, we can just wake up one day and say, okay, I'm so compassionate for myself. It takes a lot of practice, especially if you're not used to extending that compassion towards yourself. So, and it might be easier in some circumstances in your life over other circumstances in your life. So maybe start small. Find the places where it is easier for you to experience self-compassion and then work from there. And like anything else, it is a muscle that we can build. So as you may know, my focus word for the year 2021 is freedom. When we allow ourselves the freedom to feel and acknowledge our own suffering, we will find the path forward, and so that we can get out of stuck. And we need to extend ourselves that self-compassion in order to really ease that suffering so we can move forward again. So I hope that this message resonates with you all in some way. Thank you so much for joining me today. I'm always so grateful whenever you watch these videos or on whichever platform. These are on my Facebook Live or my Facebook business page, Wings Unfolded. They also appear on my YouTube channel under the playlist Growing in Uncertainty. And please share, like these videos. The more you like and share them, the more people know about them, the more exposure to these ideas, people will be able to access these more. That's a better way of putting it. And also I want to mention again that I am in the process of writing the book of Stuck. It is almost done. I will be doing some book launches. If you want to know when that's going to happen, subscribe to my email list. You can do that on my website, www.tess-miller.com. And if you want to embark on some transitions in your own life, you can set up a free coaching with me on my website under the Test Your Wings complimentary session. You can find me here on Facebook. You can find me here on YouTube. You can also find me on my LinkedIn pages, either under my name or my business name, Wings Unfolded. I'm also on Instagram under my name. And remember that it is totally okay to be stuck, but you don't have to stay there. Thank you so much for watching. Take care and have an amazing week. Bye.